Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Saturday night. We haven't live streamed in the last number of days. I was away on vacation. All those hurricanes have finally died off. Amen for that. And now we seem to be entering into a period of quiet and calm, relatively speaking, for at least a little while. And we are going to see a pattern that's going to basically be warmer than normal in the east and cooler than normal in the west. This weekend being one of the interruptions in that general pattern with the trough that moved on through. And we had a very wild day here in my particular area. We had water spouts all over the place along the south shore of Long Island, and some pretty interesting looking water spouts as well. You can see some of the videos I put up on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, if you want to check those out. So on this Saturday evening with Awesome Gamer, Shaq the Black Hole, Karina Rivera, Anish Patel, Nadia Post, good evening to you. And as far as the tropics are concerned, by the way, it looks like after this really unusually intense period where we had the major hurricanes from Harvey, Irma, Jose, Lee, and Maria. And, of course, Katia was in the mix, although Katia did not become a major hurricane. So we had HIJKL, 6 hurricanes from the end of August to the end of September. It stands to reason that the tropics are going to go quiet for a little bit. Now, the models have been kind of indicating that there would be maybe the chance of something developing perhaps in the Northwest Caribbean or in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico sometime later next week. But they've sort of backed away from that idea. And when we go to the video here in a second, because I wanted to get into the long range, we're going into the month of October, and going forward, the weather pattern gets a little more complicated. So I kind of like to draw on the maps and explain what's happening in the upper air. So we'll go back to the non-Brady Bunch format like we usually have, and we'll run the weather video now, and when we come back we'll take some questions. So just stand by. Here we go, and I'll chat with you guys in the meantime on the chat board. So hang on. Here we go. Well, we had a pretty active day here in the Northeast, thanks to an upper air disturbance that dropped down. I actually had a number of water spouts that developed in my neck of the woods late this morning, and this is the upper air disturbance that we're talking about. It's moving southeastward. There's a little low that's forming right along the coast, and that's actually bringing down some even cooler air across much of the Northeast into the mid-Atlantic states. Got a nice high that's coming down that is eventually going to warm things up again. We also have disturbed weather that's running from east of Florida down into the eastern Gulf states. We've got some clouds and some showers over parts of the plains and over through West Texas, and there's even some activity going on. We'll switch views here, and you'll take a look at the western part of the United States, and there you have it. Whoops, there you go. And you can see there's moisture that's coming up from Texas. Kind of a bit of a monsoonal flow there out into the Rockies, producing some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Much of the West not really doing very much of anything, and we've got some activity, big storm that's way out in the Pacific Ocean. But there's nothing that really stands out. It's quieted down after that run of 4 weeks with all those major hurricanes running around. We don't really see too much happening at this point from that respect. So here's a look at the radar this evening from what's left of the thunderstorms that pushed down southeastward across parts of Long Island and southern New England. And by the way, for many areas over central Long Island, this was probably the heaviest thunderstorm activity we've seen all year. Disturbed weather producing some showers and thunderstorms parts of northeastern Florida and also over parts of southwest Florida and out in the Gulf. We're going to take a look at the tropics in just a second so you can get an idea of what that all means in that part of the world. And as we go out further west, some showers back through just south of South Texas, and then You can see the showers and storms that are going on through parts of West Texas and then up through the Rockies and even up into parts of Utah and Idaho and in the Pacific Northwest. We're seeing some shower activity coming in from off the ocean there. There you go, all rolling in. So again, not too much going on with respect to any kind of strong storm systems. It's just a pretty quiet late September, early October pattern. Now, as we look at the tropics, and you'll see there's actually quite a bit of disturbed weather, some in the central tropical Atlantic. We've got some showers and storms across the northeast Caribbean over Puerto Rico and on northward out into the Atlantic. That's with one, there's a tropical wave, and then there's an upper trough. We'll show that to you. And then we've got this larger area of disturbed weather from the northwest Caribbean into the eastern Gulf, and then off the southeast coast of the United States. And there's even a little bit of disturbed weather. You can see it here in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. But when we look at the water vapor imagery, it's a mess in terms of the upper pattern. It's just sheer all over the place. You've got upper lows. There's one upper low here in the northeastern Gulf. Here's another upper low that's sitting just to the west of the disturbed weather in the northeastern Caribbean. And there's even a third upper low that's interacting with some kind of tropical wave that's out in the Atlantic, in the central tropical Atlantic. So when you look at conditions overall in the tropics right now, they are exactly the opposite of what they've been in the last 3 or 4 weeks. There's just conditions here are not favorable for any kind of development over the next several days at least. Might change a little bit later in the forecast period in the Caribbean, perhaps into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But the models have been doing that for the last 4 or 5 days, and they keep pushing it back. So we'll have to, I wonder whether that's all going to come into play or not. So why don't we look at the long-term pattern here and see where we're going. And here's the European from today. So we'll start it back at the beginning. Sets up with a trough in the west and a trough in the east and a bit of a ridge in the middle. This trough is going to swing out and lift up and out. So when it does that, this ridge is going to come into the eastern part of the United States and build again, which is what we saw last week. And by Tuesday, we've got a big upper high sitting in the eastern states. So that's going to mean temperatures are going to warm up considerably again. Maybe not to quite the extreme of what we saw last week, but it'll still get pretty warm. And then we have a trough that's out from the western plains into California and Nevada, upper air disturbance dropping there, a bit of a ridge that's building up into the Pacific Northwest. So there really isn't too much change in the overall flavor here, where you have a ridge in the west, a trough in the east. But this ridge in the east doesn't last too long, because by the end of the week, we have another trough that swings on through, so that'll bring in the cold front. And to me, the upper pattern kind of looks like it's transitioning into something. What, I'm not sure of yet. But when we go to the last day on the European, which is day 10, October 10th, you have a trough swinging out. You got a little vortex that's suddenly pops up north of Hudson's Bay. Big upper high that builds off the Pacific Northwest coast. Kind of a split flow here in the Pacific, a weak one. And generally a west-southwest flow running from Texas into the Northeast. So this will probably this will mean warmer than normal temperatures on average for the first part of the month of October. And there's a bit of a signature here on the European of some kind of tropical system over Florida, but whether that's real or not remains to be seen. So we'll carry on with the GFS at this point. GFS has a much more impressive trough, and when we go beyond this is actually the new GFS, so we can roll it back here for you. And there's your trough swinging out. Big ridge builds in the east, much like the European, gets flattened out by a trough that swings through here late this coming week, next week. Then that lifts out. Then you get another trough that looks a little bit more of a dominating feature on the GFS than it does on the European, but you still get to that west-southwest flow eventually. And when we jump over, I'll go to the prior run because it goes out a little further. On the whole, it doesn't really, there's no big storms in here. It looks like still all the activity wants to be in the west in general. So we're going to just we're in this period right now, the first half of October, where the atmosphere is trying to sort of figure out where it's going to go as we get deeper into the fall. So we're not likely to see too much in the way of big weather events here in the eastern part of the United States unless we get some kind of tropical development. And I will put up the actual weather map here so we can take a look at this. And it rolls all back. So here's that push of reinforcing cool air out in the west. You've got some rain and snow up in the Rockies. And then another system drops in there. But in the east, that big high moves out. You gradually see it settle along the mid-Atlantic states, which will warm things up. There's your next week cold front at the end of the week that kind of piles on through. Little action out there in the Rockies and into the northern plains with some rain. And it does have also, you can see down in the eastern Gulf, a little low of some kind that it develops, but doesn't really do much with it, just kind of carries it inland and northwest with some rain. And then as we move on, we start to see, some kind of system that makes an appearance south of Bermuda. Whether that's real or not remains to be seen. Pressures, though, still remain pretty low in the Gulf and in the Caribbean. Now, whether that leads to a tropical storm development or not down the road remains to be seen. But the pattern would, of course, this time of year would suggest that tropical activity will begin to shift away from the deep tropics and shift westward to the areas west of 60 degrees west, closer to the United States, into the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, the Southwest Atlantic. That's probably where you're going to see, you're going to start to see development rather than see it coming out of the deep tropics. And on the longer range, from the older run, same story, really no big deal, just weather systems coming through, general warmer air in the west, and it looks like generally cooler air in the east. All right, so stick around for just a second. We'll switch it off, and we'll tackle some of your questions. Okay, so I'm back. Well, you can see how quiet things are for the most part. And by the way, it's bone dry.
Okay, so I'm back.
Whoops.
Well, you can see how quiet things are.
And how I'm not used to shutting the audio off now that I went back to this format. But pattern, usually, at least in this part of the U.S., is very dry and very dry for this time of year. September and October, October in particular, the driest month of the year. So to see the pattern go kind of benign would not be all that unusual. I would also don't think it would be that unusual. We'll probably still see a couple of tropical systems fire up, but as you saw on the water vapor imagery, the tropical Atlantic back to the Gulf of Mexico and the subtropical Atlantic just littered with the cold upper air storms. There's a lot of hostile wind conditions are pretty hostile over a large portion of the tropics. And I also think we're now getting past the point where we're going to see action coming out of the deep tropics anyway, as the pattern makes its transition over to something more starting to head toward winter here. So we're going to see the jet stream continue to lower and further south. You're going to start to see stronger winds in the upper atmosphere pushing southward. So we're also going to be looking with greater importance of what's going on in Canada, the Gulf of Alaska, out in the Atlantic, up in the North Atlantic. So gradually over the next number of weeks, I'll start to introduce some indices that we'll be looking at and watching, trying to look for blocking patterns and so on. So, I guess we should just enjoy the quiet time. I'm certainly enjoying the break. J-Bug's Empire, when do you think it will start snowing in the Midwest? Well, J-Bug's, first things first, we got to get rid of this upper ridge in the east, okay? The trough is in the west, and wouldn't be unusual if something odd happens toward the end of the month, where you start to see a few places get their first snowflakes or snow showers or whatever, given whatever's coming down out of Canada. But we got to see what the what evolves in the upper air pattern overall. And just to repeat from what I've said many times already, I'm not doing wintertime forecasts. But we will look at some things going into the winter. We'll look at Siberian snow cover along the way. I know that's become a very popular thing over the last couple of years, so we'll take a look at that, and we'll talk about that theory and what it means. But the month of October is important with respect to the Siberian snow cover, so we'll maybe do some progress every couple of days and see what the snow cover growth has been, and then we'll talk about what it means or what it doesn't mean. It hasn't worked the last couple of years for the most part. Every day is a weather clinic with Joe. Scott Olson. Thanks. That's a very good. That's a very nice thing to say and a nice compliment. I appreciate it. Anish Patel. What is La Nina? Well, like El Nino is the abnormal warming of the waters in the Eastern Pacific, near and just north of the equator. The La Nina is the reverse. It would be water temperatures there being cooler than normal and extending out across the Pacific. So depending on the size of the La Nina and the extent of it. Now there's correlations of La Nina winters. If they're strong La Ninas, then you have an outcome that it's not that different from a strong El Nino. So it's like a moderate to weak La Nina and depending on where that La Nina is centered, could have an impact on the winters in the east. Some La Nina years have produced colder than average winters in the eastern states. But again, provided that they're not on the extreme end, because if they're on the extreme end, then the whole atmosphere is disrupted and things just don't work very well. Anthony Orr, you're always saying some kind things, and I appreciate it. Our resident hurricane statistician, Anthony Orr. Looks like some leaf changes in here in Vermont. Lots of green left. Yeah, well, that's going to, the warmer than average temperatures, sometimes it's the amount of rainfall or lack of it that kind of impacts the length of the fall color season. But for now, it looks like everything might be sort of on schedule. We'll see what happens. Certainly with the cool air coming in this weekend, giving us an idea of wintertime coming at some point. Let's see. By dry October, it's good for the harvest. So, Scott, it's been really bone dry here in my neck of the woods. I mean, today being the one exception, but that was so localized. I think I must have gotten like an inch plus of rain here from a thunderstorm, maybe even an inch and a half to 2 inches in some places. But that was this is the first time it's rained here, and I can't remember the last time. Awesome Gamer saying hi to you back. Thank you, Patricia. Oh boy, I always like to try these. Januszewski. Okay, Patricia, let me know if I got it right. Januszewski, that's my guess. Awesome Gamers wants to know if I expect more tropical formation this October. I think so. You'll probably, it's going to slow, but don't be surprised if we wind up with another couple of names getting knocked off the list. And I think you're going to see whatever development now going forward is probably going to be west of 60 degrees west, unless something forms out somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic. But if we get anything closer, to the mainland, it'll be west of 60 west, in my opinion. Janukiewicz. Januskiewicz. Okay, I'm trying. 5 of the last Atlantic Basin hurricanes, the last 6 major hurricanes, 2 of them Category 5s, and that just doesn't happen. So a break is needed, and we're fine. That's correct. The atmosphere has been just in the tropics have just been an absolute hyperdrive. So yeah, it needs to basically recharge its batteries. It's kind of like in harsh winters where you have like 6 or 7 weeks of unrelenting winter weather. It usually gets broken by well, what was traditionally called the January thaw. That's kind of the atmosphere uses that opportunity to just sort of reload and refire. Oh, good. I got it right. Thank you. How was my vacation? Awesome gamer. It was great. I had a wonderful time. I went fishing. I showed a picture of my fish the other day on the last live video I did. It was great. I caught a 20-pound king salmon. I fought with a whole bunch of others, and it was wonderfully relaxing and a great way to recharge my batteries from what was a really frantic period of weather. I can't remember a 4-week stretch like that in a long. Maybe in the wintertime it might get like that because if there's several systems in a row, but boy, that hurricane stretch was really something. And yes, Scott Olson, I am relaxed. I'm much more relaxed now. Kevin Francis, do hurricanes cross the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean and vice versa? You see more going from Atlantic to Pacific than Pacific to Atlantic because of where they form in the Pacific. If they're moving northeastward, they're pretty far north and they have to cross a larger area of land, but occasionally it does happen. In the Atlantic, they can come across along 15 north and move across Central America where they don't have to cross a large landmass, so they'll weaken, but the core of the circulation usually will be intact, and when it comes out the other side, it'll re-strengthen. That does happen from time to time. Ellen Abraham, did the cat and dog miss you? Husband out halibut fishing. He and friends have ate so far. Oh, nice. And I will one day come visit Alaska. It's been on my list for a long, long time. So one of these days I will get out there. Yeah, they did, very much so. The cat especially, for some reason, was just all over me. I don't know where he is. He's usually front and center when I'm doing these videos, but he doesn't seem to be around. And the dog is in the kitchen taking a nap. He went to the groomers today, and he's just absolutely exhausted. Let's see. The hurricanes gave you a break. Wish it would be can be that way for anyone. Yeah, it's really it's really awful what's going on with what happened in Puerto Rico. They had a Category 5 hurricane aiming right at them, and it was no secret. And I can't. It's hard for me to kind of gauge, and I don't want to quarterback because having worked for the federal government for a little while, I know how difficult sometimes it can be to cut through bureaucracy just to get a pencil. A requisition for a pen and a pencil. So I'm just letting things kind of play out and being the impartial sideline observer. Weather info. Could I still get hit by a hurricane in Norfolk? Well, look, as you get deeper into the month of October, it gets more and more difficult to bring storms up the East Coast for a number of reasons. And so far this season, it seems to be that they don't really want to, move up the coast. And we certainly haven't seen the kinds of troughs that you would need in the east in order to bring them up the eastern seaboard. So that's not to say that something can't happen. But right now, I kind of like to look at when things happen, they tend to repeat themselves. And if you look at Jose, Maria, Irma, their tracks were not that dissimilar. I mean, obviously there were differences, but, there was a certain similarity to all those tracks. And I don't, it's in years where they go up the East Coast, they all go up the East Coast, or in years where they all go in the Caribbean or they all go in the Gulf of Mexico. So, this year's pattern's been kind of set. So it's hard to think, it's not impossible that something could kind of go in a different way. Yes, Karina, we could get a group trip go up to Alaska. I'm all for it. All right, folks. It's the first live stream back. We'll get these back to normal. We'll be back tomorrow night, probably at about the same time, 9 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll go from there. I will be on a normal work schedule beginning on Tuesday, so we can actually do this again on Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So I hope everybody had a great day and a great first half of your weekend. Hope that you will have a great second half of your weekend. If you're here in the Northeast, it is cool out. You're going to need a jacket if you're going outside. The temperatures will be down in the 40s in a lot of places tomorrow morning, and some of the cold spots up north. There's all kinds of frost advisories up for the season's first frost. So enjoy your Sunday. We'll see you tomorrow night, 9 o'clock Eastern time, and we'll see what the models are telling us and we'll look at the long range, and pretty soon gonna have to look at that first snowstorm for somebody. That'll be coming along the way. We'll have that short period where you could have a hurricane in one spot and a snowstorm going on in another. Wouldn't be a big surprise. Have a great rest of your Saturday night, folks. We'll talk. Oh wait, Bill Good wants to talk about my salmon. I think I saw your cat escaping out the back door with the big salmon. Yeah. I didn't. I just saw. Yeah, that was a 20-pound king salmon that I caught, and I catch and release. It's all gone. Oh, Rob Salvatore is on. Fall is hitting the Midwest. It sure is, Rob. Good to see you here. Awesome. All right, folks. Have a great night. We'll talk to you tomorrow.